Welcome back to week 5 of Bible study. I hope last week's break maybe gave you a little time to rest up. If you don't know me, I'm Cassie. I teach Bible study. My husband wears my glasses and runs sound. We got a bunch of little kids. They're running around. They're not really little anymore, actually. They're 15, 12, 10, and 9. We don't have little kids anymore at that stage. So I'm glad you're here. Let's go ahead and pray. Everybody get in their places, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Lord, thank you for the morning. Thank you for bringing us here in spite of a season of, feels like sickness for everyone, and heartache and trials. Lord Jesus, I pray that you would just sit with us in these moments where there are tough things going on in our hearts and our minds and in the world around us. Let us be able to hear words from you, that we would remember that you are with us, even in our trials and our battles and in our struggles, that you go before us, Lord Jesus, and that you promise that no matter how hard it is here, that we get eternity with you. Just be with us now. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, so last week when Emily taught, we saw the power of the Lord of hosts. He's the Lord of David who fulfills his promises. He is a present Lord who blesses. He is a Lord of rest who rules over this already and the not yet of the kingdom. And he is the Lord who gives us hope because he is faithful in fulfilling his promises. He blesses his servants, and he redeems his people through the work of his son Jesus, who is our greater king. A greater king who would one day come from the line of David to rule and to reign for eternity. And this week, I was a little bit ahead. We actually get to stay in the goodness for just a little bit longer before everything just absolutely falls apart next week. This week we step into the goodness of a kingdom and the righteous rule of God's anointed, where the king offers a seat at the table. So, to get us started, let's look together at 2 Samuel 9, 7 through 13, and see what we can draw out through our observations. 2 Samuel 9, 7 through 13. Who wants to read it in the ESV?
I'll read it.
Okay.
And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul, your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant, that you should show regard for dead dogs such as I?" Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "All that belonged to Saul and to his house I have given to your master's grandson, and you and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet.
First of all, I'm going to give her a hand for saying Mephibosheth 50 times. All right. First, what are we looking for? Are there any patterns you see? Any repeated words? Any repeated themes or ideas? What's the stuff we can pick out easy first?
Your servants, your masters, servant. It's kind of like in the second half.
There's a servant. For Dagon. Servant. I belong to Saul in his house. I have given to your master's grandson. You and your servant shall till the land. Produce your master's grandson may have bread to eat.
And then there's 20 servants.
20 servants. His servant, so will your servant do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons.
All the way down.
Ziba's house with servants. in Jerusalem, the Adolf's King's table. What else? What else do you see?
Like, eat at my table always, or eat
Yep.
at my table or whatever, but
Basically
Or
that.
eat or ate, but already in the not yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because so there's a you will, and then it says he did, right?
Fourth line.
Eat at my table always.
and then you have to skip down to grandson shall always eat at my table.
Yeah, 20 servants to the right.
There we go. Shall eat at my table. Eat at David's table. Like one of the
And
king's
then at the
son.
very bottom, he ate always at the king's table. So I'm split.
He ate always at the king's table. So this idea of a new position, is that an idea of a new position, right? What are the three things that David promises him? One, what'll I do? I'll show you Hesed, right? Because now at this point we know anytime we see that word kindness, it's that word Hesed, love. For the sake of your father Jonathan, so here's why. I will restore you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. So we have 1, 2, 3 things that he promises, right? What else? Who else does he talk about? Who's saying this, by the way? David. Right. So this is David and not God. This is what David's going to do. David said he's going to do it for his friend. So why is he going to do it for his friend? Did he make a promise to do that?
Yeah. Well, he made the promise in 1 Samuel. There's a couple of he, and then the king also. Right
Yeah,
there.
we can put those together. I did.
The king.
The king. So this is, he's talking to Ziba, but this is really a conversation that has 2 main characters. Who are
he's
they?
talking to Ziba and Mephibosheth. Because
Yeah.
the first part is Mephibosheth.
Is Ziba.
Response.
And his response, and then back to Ziba again. Here's the king. Is this like a covenant? Does this sound like a covenant? Where you have the vassal state and the one that's in charge, and he says, this is what I'm gonna do for you.
Sounds a little bit like redemption, like what Boaz does for Ruth.
Heck yeah. And he's in that line, isn't he? Moabites.
You're talking about David, Jonathan, towards David. you mean?
Yeah, I'm saying like this has similar, I think, connotations to what Boaz does in terms of redeeming a
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, so we have an idea of redemption. Oh, I don't have any room to write it, but you guys can write it on your paper. Redemption, so an idea of redemption, that's gonna come into play a little bit
Especially
later.
because it talks about like his son.
Anybody
It talks about that.
have Blue Letter Bible that can look up what eat or ate means?
It's also just not someone you normally would suspect a king of redeeming. Like Ruth was a foreigner. She didn't really
Yeah.
have any
Yeah.
right to anything. And Mephibosheth, isn't he crippled? Isn't I mean
Yes.
he's
Yeah,
lame,
he's a
so
cripple.
technically like he could just be tossed aside and no one would say has any right to anything legally.
What did David say in chapter 5 about cripples? Do you remember?
Like leave them at the gate.
Yeah, they weren't allowed in the city. Why? Because the guy who was over Jerusalem before he took it back
Protect you.
said that
They
the
would
cripples
protect
would
the
be,
city.
yeah, the cripples would protect the city and David would never get in, and David said no cripple will ever enter this city once I take it. But here he set somebody at his table.
I think also like it's not included in this part, but like right before it when Mephibosheth like first comes, like he bows down. And, like it says, like in fear. And it's like because he could have just been killed because of what his family did. Like
Yeah. What does he say? What does he say to him? True regard for a dead dog such as I. Where did we hear the word dog in 2 Samuel. Do you remember who talked about being a dog? Chapter 2, maybe 3. Abner. What am I, a dog's head of Israel, that you would accuse me something over a woman? So notice how different, like one is out of arrogance, this one's out of humility. So we have a contrast in Saul's household of arrogance versus humility, don't we? Did anybody find 8 or eat in the letter?
I found shall eat was one.
What's that
and
mean
it
in
says
Hebrew?
To eat, devour, burn up,
Yeah.
feed. And it kind of goes on to say devour, consume, of fire, to devour, slay. Of sword.
Yeah. So is he like, you can come and have some appetizers?
No.
No, he's like, you can come and eat to the fullest. You can devour, you can consume. And so, what is the king providing? He's providing protection, restoration, right? And so we have this idea of, here's a picture of what a good king does. A good king restores. A good king provides, right? What else does a good king do? Is there anything else that you see in this passage? What's the last thing he does? He offers him what? A seat at the table. What happens when he gets to take a seat at the table?
He becomes his son.
He becomes what?
His son.
Yeah, he's adopted. He becomes like a son. So his position changes, doesn't it? So a good king changes our position. He restores us and he provides for us. 3 really simple things. I know it's a lot of words, but I had to get to the last 8 at the king's table in order, so we had to put them all in there. I usually don't give this many verses.
She walked in and I was like, you had to pick you picked more verses? I was like, do you know how hard it was to cram all that on the whiteboard?
I know.
Yeah, you had no room to write anything on.
0, had no room to write. So what's our hope in this? Like, what is the hope that we see? Can you see one? Think forward. Think to Jesus. Think to Revelation.
We're promised to see it.
Yeah, we're promised a seat at the table. I keep forgetting the word, but he's a picture, a pre-picture of, he's a forerunner of what a good king would look like in Jesus. And so before he takes a nosedive in the next set of chapters into oblivion, God shows us this is what a good king, and I really just apologize that you showed up for like the worst. The next couple weeks are going to be awful. It's just, we're going to talk about some really hard things next couple weeks. Okay, any other thoughts on this? Anything that makes you think differently about God? Things that you're thankful for, that give you encouragement, maybe things that you need to repent of? Like, do we always recognize that we have a good king who, even if our situation feels like it's really awful, that he's with us, that he's given us a seat at the table, that he's promised he's going to restore us, even if that's not now, but that's when we get heaven, right? That we have an eternal restoration that's coming? Are we reminded of those things? Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think it's cool to think about, like, I don't think I always come into the Lord's presence thinking that I'm in a place of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we are like nothing, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, I think, like, him coming into David's presence, he probably was so afraid because what he deserved was death. Like, he was a part of Saul's line, and like, he deserved death. And I think the line of, do not fear. Like, I think that's what the Lord says to us, but I don't always have that, like, fear in me of my position before the Lord. And then I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. Like, I will show you kindness for the sake of my son Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's just a really beautiful picture.
It is a beautiful picture.
I think it's cool, like how David showed that, like, Saul's sins do not outweigh, like, his covenant with Jonathan.
His covenant promises, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, he does say like it's Saul, your grandfather, like, and that's how he refers to him through the rest of it is like your master's grandson. It doesn't refer to him as Jonathan's son after the very beginning, like, and so the fact that he was like, I know who your grandfather was, I know what line you're from, and yet like I will still love you because I love your father.
Yeah, I'll still keep that covenant. Yep, for sure. Absolutely. All right, anything else? I think those were all good things. And obviously, if we wanted to take more time, we could flesh that out even more. That's a lot of verses. We could probably spend a whole 40 minutes on that one day. But that's a good overview of just learning to pick out like what the Lord's showing us about himself and about what he wants us to know about him. All right, so David's promises of a seat at the table, it highlights the blessed beginning of his reign. This earthly authority that he's wielding under the power of his heavenly blessing, it appears to be setting all things into a right order for the sake of his kingdom. David in chapters 8 through 10 is a window into what life looked like under the authority and blessing of God. A life that did not come without suffering and conflict, but one that did reflect the honor of godly rule. And there are observations we can make about the king from our study this week in 2 Samuel chapters 8 through 10. First, we can see that the king restores his kingdom. The king restores his kingdom. 2 Samuel 8, 1 through 6. After this, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Megathemah out of the hand of the Philistines, and he defeated Moab, and he measured them with a line, making them lie down on the ground. 2 lines he measured to be put to death, 1 full line to be spared. And the Moabites became servants to David and brought tribute. David also defeated Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah, as he went to restore his power at the river Euphrates. And David took from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers, and David hamstrung all the chariot horses, but left enough for 100 chariots. And when the Syrians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 men of the Syrians. And then David put garrisons in Amram of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought tribute, and the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. After this, chapter 8 starts with an after this. It's important because it's telling us that this is post-promise from God to David. Remember that whole big promise when we met together last time that God gave David of what he was going to do for him. And so now we are going to see those promises worked out in the life of the king. So David smites his enemies 5 times in chapters 8 through 10. God tells us that David was able to strike his enemies in a way that he destroyed their armies. Some of them he sent the rest hightailing, others he completely slaughtered, right? He is an active participant, David, in the victory of God's people under the authority of God's promises for the future of God's kingdom. I'm going to say that again. David is an active participant in the victory of God's people under the authority of God's promises for the future of God's kingdom. He subdues all his enemies, meaning he humbles and humiliates his foes. He defeats the Philistines to the southwest, Moab to the southeast, the Zoabites to the north, Syria to the northeast, all the way to the Euphrates River. That's all the way into modern day Iraq. He's in Amram to the east, and eventually Amnon, he'll do the same. And it shows us that God's promises are fulfilled promises. He gave David victory wherever he went. He subdued, humiliated, and destroyed his enemies on all sides. Every side that was not the ocean, he put down. He expanded the territory of Israel to encompass nation upon nation who would pay tribute to the king. And not only did they collect money, they collected spoils wherever they went. He collected silver and gold and bronze and shields made of precious metals. and money from the different kingdoms, like 7 that it lists in this passage. And verse 9 of chapter 8 says that Toi, who realizes, oh man, he's putting everyone down and we better get in line, right? Toi didn't just hear, he listened with obedience. He listened with obedience and went to beg favor and blessing from David. Look, you killed my enemy, but I know if I don't fall in line, you're probably going to kill us too. We're just going to come straight up under you. Listening with obedience. What an idea. Woo! Listen with I see you. Just so you'll know, I've been sick for the last 3 days. I'm probably got to take a lot of drinks today. Sorry if I cough on you. So those blessings through battles and tributes, they were dedicated and stored away. What do you think they would later be used for? All that gold, all that silver, all that bronze. Why would David keep it? What do we use it for? The temple. So here we see God making preparation for his eventual temple that Solomon would build. The temple and the kingdom were coming. Even though David isn't the one who gets to build it, he gets to prepare. So David dedicated to the Lord, or it says he consecrated by power, all those things which would later be used to build a temple for God's dwelling place with men. And God's blessing fell upon David so strong that he created a name for himself wherever he went. The name of a king who was blessed by God to do the will of God for the people of God in his time. Do you see a theme? God loved his servant and he gave David deliverance wherever he went. That word that they use for victory, it actually says in the Hebrew that he constantly delivered him, letting you know that his victories were not by his hand, but they were by the hand of God. And I think maybe sometimes it's hard to read passages like this and not fall a little bit into this health and wealth mindset. One that has an expectation that if I'm called by God, I will receive the blessing of God, but not the suffering of God. We skip past the part where all of David's blessings came with a battle. There wasn't any of those blessings that didn't come without hardship. And the difference between David and his enemies was that every time they met, they were facing David accompanied by the king of creation, not just the king of a people. So we need to ask ourselves what our expectations are as believers of Jesus. Is our expectation blessing and ease because we've chosen to follow the hard road after Christ? Is our expectation, there we go. Is our expectation a life of ease because we have submitted to the Savior? Or is our expectation presence in the midst of the battle? Knowing that our ultimate blessing is eternity with the Father, we get presence. Knowing that to follow Jesus is to suffer for his sake, carrying our own cross and denying ourselves, looking not to the things which are seen, but that which is unseen, which is an eternity with our Savior. What is your expectation? David expected blessing, and God expected justice, but he meted out. Our second observation is the king who brings justice to his kingdom. The king brings justice to his kingdom. David ruled a united kingdom. Right there in that verse it says, he reigned over all of Israel, right? The fullness of God's people have come together under one banner. The great I am, he is over his people. The end of chapter 8 tells us that David ruled with justice, where the idea here is once again that he is fashioning and working justice or good judgment over the kingdom. It's not passive. It's he is working it. And that idea of working and fashioning things will go all the way through chapters 8, 9, and 10. He will fashion judgment. And he'll ask the question, what does it mean to judge justly? It means that he punished the wicked and rewarded the godly in a way that was honoring to the Lord. Doing so by ruling with equity. What does it mean to rule with equity? It means to rule with righteousness or rightness over a people. This is peak David being who he is supposed to be. This is the pinnacle for him. It's who he's supposed to be when he is in submission to God and under the blessing of God. But he didn't do this on his own, did he? It gives us a whole list of people that he ruled with. He ruled with armies. Joab was his general over him. He ruled over religion. Levitical priests who were leaders over the Levitical worship services to God. He ruled with government officials. He names a recorder, a secretary, and chief ministers who were his sons. They were not priests like you think they were priests. So the idea or word for priest, if we look in 1 Chronicles 18:17, it's not a function in a Levitical manner, but as a royal minister. So they were chief advisors to the king. That's how his son got to be priests. They weren't priests like we think about them. Because I know that was a question that we had that would come up. So in this moment of peak obedience, David is foreshadowing what the king should look like on earth. This is what a good king is. He's a foreshadowing. And there are reasons that God sets rulers and authorities in power on this planet. Romans 13:1-4 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. And those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer." God has placed David, as well as rulers who come after him, as servants for good. And that's going to be really hard for us to see in just a few chapters. It's hard to see sometimes in our life when we do or we don't agree with those who have been placed in power and have been placed to rule over us. But they are placed in authority and a reminder, for good or for bad, that things are not the way they're supposed to be. And we have a king who will one day come to rule as he is supposed to, with justice and equity and this chesed love for his people. David's righteous rule doesn't end with his people. It extends through his mercy to the kingdom. And I want to go back and say, I know that it is hard to see that sometimes. Maybe the last 4 years were hard for you to look at the king or the ruler and say, oh, I'm going to pray for you like I'm supposed to. And not just feel like, ugh. Maybe the last year and a half, you're like, ugh. Maybe, I don't know anyone in this building like this, for the last 10 years, you've been like, ugh, right? And so it's hard to see, hey, for good or bad, we know this is what a king is supposed to look like, or we know this is what a king is not supposed to look like. But it is pressing us on towards the perfect king, Jesus, right? We know things are not supposed to be this way. We are waiting for the king who extends mercy to his kingdom, this king who shows mercy. And it begins with kindness to his enemy. 2 Samuel 9:1 says, "And David said, is there anyone left in the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Chesed love, steadfast, faithful, merciful kindness. He says, how can I love my enemy? How can I love them by showing kindness to my friend who I made a covenant promise with? So he shows kindness to his friend in 2 Samuel 9:3, and the king said, is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him? Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. Jonathan, who David loved, Jonathan who was like a brother, Jonathan who risked his life for David over and over, had a son that David could show his chesed love too. The story of Jonathan reminds us that what we do for others and how we treat them can have generational effects on a family. Do you realize that? Your way that you treat and you love people can change the entire trajectory of their family for generations. And I know that can feel heavy, right? Because ultimately it's on God. But don't think that God doesn't rule and work through you. How you love others can have generational effects. Jonathan's chesed love for David brought blessing to his son even in his absence. Here is a son of Jonathan, one of your subjects, David, a subject to whom you can show kindness. Verse 6 says, and Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David, and he fell on his face and he paid homage. And David said, Mephibosheth! And he answered, behold, I am your servant. That's what he was supposed to do. That was a proper greeting for the king, just so you know. That's why Ziba did the same thing. Mephibosheth. Are you ready for it? You ready for what his name means? Remover of shame. Dispeller of shame. Mephibosheth, who will have the shame of his past, the shame of his family, the shame of his name wiped clean by the king. He humbly comes and he falls before his king just for David to provide him a seat at the table. The king provides a seat at the table. Verse 7 says, and David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore you to the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. A sequence of things that he promises to him. David, who in chapter 5 said he hated the blind and the lame, he hated the cripples, and they would never enter his house, now welcomes in the lame and a cripple who would receive immeasurable blessing for the sake of his father. And he's offered 3 different things. First, he's offered kindness. Second, he's offered restoration. And third, he's offered a seat at the table. This kindness, this chesed love, that is not for his own sake, but for the sake of his father. A good reminder that there are probably many times in our lives that we receive kindness and mercy, not because of ourselves, but because of someone else. He receives restoration, a place not only among the people with land so that there's provision and servants to help him as the master who's crippled, but most importantly, he gives him a seat of honor. He gives him a seat at the table. Mephibosheth, the remover of shame, he goes from a position of dread to adoption as a son. His whole identity has been changed. Notice the comparison that it gives us between him and Abner, one who is haughty in Saul's family versus one who is humble. Mephibosheth, who is raised up, versus Abner, who is eventually brought low. And it may have looked to the outside world as if Mephibosheth was too lowly to converse with a king, but in this moment of David's just rule, even the lowly have a seat at the table to feast with the king and enjoy the pleasures of his household. David promised 3 different times that Mephibosheth would eternally, the part of speech is in perpetuity, forever and ever. He said that he would promise that he would have an eternal place at his table. And the last verse of chapter 9 tells us that he kept that promise all the days of Mephibosheth's life. That is the character of a good king. One who keeps his promises until the end. You see, Mephibosheth wasn't defined by his household. He wasn't defined by his past. The king loved him with merciful kindness and gave him a seat at the table because he was a just and merciful judge. His ruling kindness over his kingdom continued as he brings his enemies into submission. So here he places this person who doesn't deserve anything into a place as a table. He adopts him as a son. Then he turns to his enemies and he brings them into submission. Chapter 10 is a picture for us of what it means to lead with kindness and care under submission to the Lord for the peace of a people. First, David leads with kindness. He went to show, again, chesed love for the family of a loyal ruler. There was a past relationship with the king before the king died, and so he wants to honor the king, and he sends this royal envoy to go and tell his son, Hanun, I'm so sorry, right? So he's leading with kindness. Unfortunately for Hanun, he listened to the wrong people, not using wisdom to discern the reason for David's kindness. Hanun didn't watch who he took counsel from, and in so doing, he became a stench to David, a grave mistake that would eventually cost him and his people their lives, right? It would bring war to them. There's a fear within Hanun's people of searching out, spying out, and overthrowing that is then answered with an abysmal response to David's kindness. So he has 3 things that they say that they're worried about. So they do 3 different things. They humiliate them by shaving off their beards, cutting their clothes so that they were naked from the waist down, and then sending them out into the city to be shamed by all the people there who saw them. And in those moments, we see a king who leads with care. He didn't stay on his throne. He went to meet his people. He went to his humiliated servants. He gave them comfort. He gave them instruction. He came and gave them protection. That didn't take away their shame in the moment, did it? Him just showing up didn't take that away. Friends, sometimes we have to abide in the hard places while God restores us. He said, stay here. I've given you this place of protection and care. Stay here until you're whole again. Sometimes we have to sit and abide in the hard while God is making us whole again and restoring us. Sometimes we have to sit in the junk that comes with being people who live in a broken and fallen world, while God in his kindness comforts, instructs, and protects us until we're ready to return under the submission of the Lord, right? Sometimes he removes us for a little bit, and we sit in that hard stuff, and he puts us all back together, and then he sends us out again. And it's okay to sit in those places as long as we remember that we're sitting with the presence of our King. In these chapters, David leads under the submission of the Lord. 2 Samuel emphasizes through Joab that the battle belongs to the Lord. David is submitting and the Lord is leading. He's going before them, almost like in the desert with the Israelites, right? We got a pillar of fire, we got a pillar of cloud. God is going before David with his blessing. So Joab is confident to tell the people to be of good courage because the king is leading his people. Be strong for the sake of your people. That he says, take courage. He's like, be strong. We will be delivered from the face of our enemy. That word face, you don't see it in the way they do it, but over and over again, the idea of looking someone in the face, you're looking someone in their power. And over again, in chapter 10, you're in the face of somebody, in the power of someone, and the Lord overthrows every time. So it says, be strong for the sake of your people. We will be delivered from the face of our enemy. That passion for his people will lead Israel to peace. He is leading Israel to peace. He leads his people to a covenant of peace. 2 Samuel 10:19 says, and when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. They said, you know what? We get what's happening here. We're out. The king brings his enemies into submission. He takes the wind out of everyone's fight. They recognize that no kingdom can stand in the face of the anointed king. And I wonder if we really realize that we can take courage because our king has promised that he will lead us into battle. He doesn't promise victory in every moment, but he does promise presence in every trial. He's promised that he will not leave you. He's promised that you are not isolated. He's promised that you are not alone. So as we're fighting through what seems like very awful moments in our lives, and I know that every one of us in this room have had them. I might not know your specific moment, but I know that you have had them. We can take courage and say with our souls that it is well. We can have hope, can't we? What is our hope? Our hope is that our King has shown us eternal kindness, eternal chesed, love. Through the cross of his Son, taking upon himself and bearing in his body the weight of our eternal sin and shame. Our hope is that our King has shown us immeasurable mercy in the eternal restoration of our relationship with him. We have been adopted into his family, and we sit as sons within his home. Our hope is an eternal offering of a seat at the table, where we'll take our place at the great supper of the Lamb, and we'll feast eternally with our God, who always fulfills his promises. Our God, who has written in his own blood a covenant of peace that will be for all who believe in his name and submit themselves under the authority of his cross. That's our hope, right? Is that eternally we get the same things that David offered to Mephibosheth. Eternally, we get a seat at the table. We're not isolated. We're not alone. He's with us always. So what do we do? We're patient in hope, right? We're patient in suffering. And we're thankful when we have blessings. It's our heart response. And we recognize with worship the goodness of our King. Any thoughts? Any questions?
I have a question. So we know this is we know that Mephibosheth was dropped when they were running away, and that's how he became crippled.
Yes.
But would they have also considered it part of a generational sin that he became crippled because of his
I don't think so.
grandfather was, or because of his circumstance?
Yeah, I think that I think that they would make, obviously it's just opinion.
Since he wasn't born.
Yeah, I think they wanted you to know he wasn't born crippled, that somebody panicked and dropped him
Well, didn't
when they
it
were
say-
trying to flee and trying to escape.
Didn't it say that his feet were, there was something wrong with his feet, and
Yeah,
a
he
nurse
was-
had to carry him and then dropped him and became so there was something before he was dropped.
Yeah, I think the idea though that his crippledness, it did come from the servant who did drop him. I think it all ties in together. And we don't really get it really well from the Hebrew to the English. Other thoughts? Other questions? Anything that's encouraging to you? Anything you need to be reminded of?
Patient and suffering.
Yeah, patience and suffering. We're not great at that, are we? Especially in the United States. My way, right away. Fix it now. We don't like to sit. Not at all. We don't want to be patient in our suffering. And we do, it's really hard. I think a lot of America, we do have an undertone in a lot of our stuff with this health and wealth gospel. Not and it doesn't come out, it comes out differently in different people and denominations, right? But I think there's a lot of this underlying thing. This is why people get so mad and so upset with God. This idea that if I follow him, all that bad stuff that happens to other people shouldn't happen to me because I'm doing what I'm supposed to. And we totally disregard that if we are with Christ, we suffer with him. And so it's not easy, it's awful, right? But I think that there's this underlying idea, and that's why people get so mad they walk away a lot of times is, well, I did what I was supposed to, I checked all the boxes, I was following after you. None of this should have ever happened to me. And so it's really hard. And I'm not saying that the situations that are not awful and don't suck real bad, okay? I'm just saying, if we're thinking eternally, you know, if at the end of the day we end up in a cardboard box, but we get Jesus, that's all we need. And it's hard to feel that way. We don't want to suffer. We don't like to suffer. And we shouldn't either. We weren't made for that. Sin brought that.
It's such a testimony to other people though if we suffer well.
Yeah.
I
Right?
mean, it changes their lives too. It's not just about us.
Yeah. Yeah. We can immediately go right to Patricia, can't we?
Yep.
We watched her suffer well. And then I've known her for the last 8 years, right? And she loved Jesus until she was with him. And she changed how we look at things and view things, didn't she? For those of us who got to spend time with her. Other thoughts? Ryan, how you doing back there? Thoughts? You always have thoughts. You haven't said anything.
I was thinking
tonight.
about Dar. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about you. We just have suffered a lot of loss lately.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to 4 funerals in the next 2 weeks. 4. Right? That's a lot. Suffering is all around us, isn't it? Sometimes some seasons feel harder than others, don't they? Stephanie?
She'll start crying, don't call
It's
her.
okay.